Well, conservatives have complained about the liberal media bias for years. Now, what could be proof? A Washington Post reporter assigned to cover the conservative movement resigning for writing a series of hateful and politically charged opinions like this one. After Republican Scott Brown beat Martha Coakley in the Massachusetts Senate race, you remember this, and many said it's because he ran on a platform of opposing health care. This reporter for the Washington Post, David Weigel, emailed a liberal chat group and urged other reporters, quote, "I think pointing out Coakley's awfulness is vital because, number one, it's true, and number two, it's unreasonable panic about it is doing more damage to the Democrats." Weigel's comments were then leaked by someone on this off-the-record email forum called Journalist, with about 400 left-leaning members who, quote, share information. Radio talk show host Monica Crowley is my guest now. And now Andrew Breitbart of BigGovernment.com is offering $100,000 to anybody from this Journalist who will give him the full list of who takes part in this and what is being said among these left-leaning members of the press and others, left-leaning members of the press who are conspiring, basically, about how to cover the news if you go by that email.
Right. I mean, this case blows the lid off the vast left-wing conspiracy going on in American media. You just said that this could offer proof about left-wing bias in the mainstream media. The proof of their bias is every day in all of the pages of their newspapers and magazines and some other cable networks. But what this case really shows...
But generally, there was deniability.
Yes.
Weigel does not have deniability. That's why the Washington Post fired him after that came out.
True. And remember, his beat was the conservative movement, and he was purportedly supposed to be an objective observer of the conservative movement, there to report on Sarah Palin and Republican possible nominees for the presidency and the Tea Party movement and so on. And what we have found from these leaked emails is that he was engaging in all kinds of baseless allegations of racism in the Tea Party movement, slurs, insults of very specific conservatives and the movement at large. So the Washington Post did take him off, but the difference here, Megan, is when you look at the editorial page of, say, the New York Times, you expect it to be liberal, and it is. Right. That's one thing. What this guy did was cross the line into political activism.
Okay, but wait, let me stop you there, because it is... Are we at the point now where reporters are not allowed to have opinions? I mean, reporters can't vote, reporters can't be a Democrat or a Republican and cover a story objectively. Obviously, this guy doesn't like conservatives and he doesn't like Republicans. There's no crime there. He's entitled to that opinion, even if he covers the conservative movement, isn't he?
Well, yes. However, again, there's a distinction to be made. Everybody's entitled to an opinion. That is constitutionally protected opinion speech under the First Amendment. When you are a reporter, though, and your job is to be as objective as you possibly can, and then you cross that line into not just opinion, but actual political strategizing for another party or a specific political candidate or party, then you are not only violating journalistic ethics, but you also have a duty to let the public know. I mean, look, if somebody, let's say a corporation, were engaged in political strategizing for the Republican Party or for the Democratic Party, the public would certainly have a right to know that that company was engaging in that kind of political activism. When a journalist does it, I think the public has that right to know.
Well, that is where, I mean, how far could he go? Because he clearly hates the conservative movement. I mean, he goes on and I mean, I can't even repeat what he says on the air. I can't repeat it because it's full of the F word when he talks about every conservative and Sarah Palin, you name it, he hates them. But is that all okay? Is that all okay? And the thing that pushed him over the line was it's clearly not okay to go into this liberal blog fest and strategize with other reporters. What he's basically urging them to say is, let's blame Scott Brown's win and Martha Coakley's loss, not on some public backlash against Obamacare, against health care, but let's point out to everybody how awful Coakley was. That's really why she lost and Scott Brown won. That's what he's saying. He's saying, look, that's true, and people are getting freaked out about Obamacare or health care because of this.
Right, and the specific wording in his email was, because if we don't focus on how bad she was as a candidate, it's creating more and more panic among Democrats, meaning it's going to spread. So how can we staunch the bleeding here for the Democrats?
That's not okay. But what about all the vile thoughts thoughts that he has about Republicans. Do you agree that that is okay? Maybe he has vile thoughts, and yet he can be a really fair reporter.
Well, I mean, the question about whether or not he can be fair, I think that's very debatable, and I think that's the real reason why the Washington Post actually pulled him off the conservative beat, because they said, look, when you're hurling these kinds of accusations and baseless insults of racism and so on, that also crosses a very specific line. Look, if Mr. Weigel wants to be a political strategist, as some of these emails indicate, go work for James Carville.
Well, now he's a commentator on MSNBC.
Well, and doesn't that tell you the whole story?
And I want to give credit
right
to the
there.
Daily Caller for breaking that particular, a lot of these emails, in particular the one that we just talked about Martha Coakley and Scott Brown. You know, there is still a question about who else was in this chat room, for lack of a better term, and whether we're going to learn the names, as Andrew Breitbart is trying to. Could this just be the beginning?
Well, Breitbart's going out there with a $100,000 reward, and I have to say, if I were on that listserv, I'd be first in line getting that $100,000.
Wouldn't you be
He's
a little
looking
nervous?
For the archives.
Wouldn't you be a little nervous if you were a left-leaning, straight news journalist who had gone in here and started bashing and maybe even strategizing like this guy?
And if you were engaged in that kind of political activism, you ought to be very nervous indeed. They're trying to get the archives for all of these backroom conversations that were happening on this listserv, because the point is this tells us that this may not be an isolated event. That yes, in fact, there might be a vast left-wing conspiracy among the nation's top elite journalists.
Well,
Megan, something conservatives have been complaining about for a long time, and
Bernie Goldberg and his slobbering love affair feel very, very vindicated, I imagine. All right, Monica, thanks so much for your insights on it.